Hi everyone, I thought I'd make a video about 3 science fiction riddles that I pondered about when I first studied science. And some of these things I just have a hard time wrapping my head around. So for the most part, I treat it as science fiction. But it hasn't, I believe all of these concepts have a nugget of truth to them. So when I was a kid, this is the formula for hydrogen peroxide. When I was a kid, I had really bad earwax problems one time, and a family member of mine who's a doctor suggested that I put hydrogen peroxide in my ear, a 3% solution of hydrogen peroxide. And I put a drop in my ear, and instantly I felt so much better. There was fizzing, and when I learned about the formula for hydrogen peroxide, I think I was 13 years old at the time, and I learned that it's H2O2, the 2 O's are in between the H's. It's like water, but with an extra O in between the H's. And I felt so good when I put that in my ear. I started to wonder what other chemicals I could put in my ear. And I started to fantasize about getting a really, really long molecule of H2 and then O, like a really large number. And I was thinking about what would happen if you somehow put together such a molecule, right? Imagine you had really precise equipment that could manipulate the molecules like they were Lego pieces, and you put that together. It probably wouldn't be very stable, right? I wonder what would happen if once you let go of the molecule, right? It might make a very loud explosion, right? I wonder if there's a way to simulate what any of this would look like. So around the same time, I still do, I love going to theme parks. And I especially love roller coasters. And I started to think about what would be the biggest roller coaster one could construct. And then I fantasized the idea of having a roller coaster that was tangent to the surface of the Earth. Probably not that far, but imagine if you could. And you board the ride at the middle of the roller coaster, and there's a little engine near the base of the roller coaster, and it propels you, and then you slide down, and as you pass the base of the roller coaster, it propels you again, right? I believe it would be most efficient to do the propulsion here. It's the Oberth effect, if I remember correctly. I wonder what that would feel like, though, because it would be flat, but at the same time you're going up and downhill. I wonder if there's a way to simulate what that would look like with a computer simulation or something like that. I'll have to look into that. Okay. Around that same time, well actually a few years after I fantasized about this, when I was 14, 15 years old, I started collecting coins. Obviously, 3 of my favorite elements on the periodic table were copper, silver, and gold. At the time, this element hadn't been discovered, or it might have been discovered, but there hadn't been many studies on it, so it didn't really have a name to it. And I fantasized about one day going mining for this element. I kind of estimated how much this guy would be worth by looking at how much these guys were worth, right? At the time, the ratio of gold to silver and the ratio of silver to copper was very similar, if I remember correctly. I believe about 50 to 60 to 1. And so I extrapolated and assumed that element 111, it didn't have a name at the time, I believe it's Rankinium nowadays, would be worth about 50 times what gold was, right? I believe when I was doing this, gold was only $400 an ounce, so I multiplied that by 50 and estimated that Rankinium was worth $20,000 an ounce, and I really wanted to go mining for it. I assumed that the reason we hadn't found it yet was because we didn't dig deep enough, right? Gold is usually found way underground. I thought that if you dug to like halfway to the center of the Earth, you might find this element, right? To my dismay, I eventually learned about nuclear half-lives, but then I learned about relativity, and I wondered if you could put a sample of Rankinium into like a cylinder that you could then spin at a really high speed, right, close to the speed of light, you might be able to prevent it from decaying, and then you could take a look at what it looks like. You could do all your scientific experiments. Obviously, you need to have your equipment in here as well, right? Your GCMS kind of equipment, your the reactants and all that stuff. Although getting a chemical reaction between anything else, if you wanted to see if this guy would dissolve in, let's say, aqua regia, that might be challenging, right? Because chemical reactions would also be slowed down by that, right? The best you could do is probably take a look at the element, right? Any chemical reactions would probably not work very well, right? And then I started to wonder, what if I went into the machine and spun myself at the speed of light, right? The reason I would want to do this is, let's say let's say I found a really good investment, but it's going to take hundreds of years to pay off, right? I could put my money into the investment, right? Maybe it's Rinkinium, right? So, and obviously Rinkinium would have to go with me in there, right? And then I could spin myself at the speed of light, and then I could wake up thousands of years later when it's worth lots and lots of money, right? The other thing I thought about is if I laid down on a table that was spinning at the speed of light, but at some point in my body was spinning at 0 at the center of that wheel, what might happen if, let's say, my head and my toes they stop aging, but my stomach is still aging, right? I still do not have an answer to that. It would probably turn me into some kind of weird creature, right? I wish there was a way to simulate what would happen in that case. Anyways, I hope I brought some inspiration to some of you guys. Thanks for watching.